Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Lunch with Books, or Lunch with the Symphony, if you will. If you have a cell phone, that would be the time to silence it, please. Just a couple of announcements, and I'll introduce our guest today. Will we come to order? Thank you. Next Tuesday, the roller derby memoirist will be here, Samantha Tucker, and that's October 17th at noon, and October 24th at noon. The people from the museum in Wellsburg, World War II Museum, will be here to tell us about the hell ships of World War II. To introduce our panel for today, I will introduce to you the Executive Director of the Violins Symphony, Sonia Phillips.
Really great to be here at the library today. I'm new to Wheeling and just delighted to be able to finally come to this community center. Thank you so much for being here today. This is the beginning of our Festival of Ideas, and on your table there's a full schedule. There's also on our symphony table back there. You can see the whole schedule of all that we have planned between now and our concert on October 19th, and we do hope that you'll consider coming to these free events, generously sponsored by Gail and John Rooney. Today's event is, we're here, and thank you to Sean Duffy and the library for establishing this kind of lunch with books format. And we've been thinking about this conversation and planning it for months and months and months. And so I'm going to introduce our panelists here in just a moment, but we were even talking this week about the original reason why we wanted to have this discussion leading up to this concert that will feature the Violins of Hope. And this feels like, this whole Festival of Ideas feels like an opportunity for both us as an organization and the community to have time for conversation. And this is actually a conversation around the Holocaust and the Violins of Hope and what music means in times of need, and how it can provide healing and joy and help us process all kinds of things. So this discussion today, we originally intended for it to be an education about the past, a reflection on the present, and envisioning a better future. And it feels very timely that reason still is very important. So I'm going to introduce our panelists and pass it off to them for discussion. First off, we've got Music Director John Devlin. We've got Barbara Wine, who is a very strong member of the community and also a Violins of Hope docent for the Pittsburgh exhibit. So you're not going to want to miss visiting that exhibit. And of course, Rabbi Lee. So I'm going to turn it over to them. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Sonia. First, let me say thank you to you all for being here to participate in this conversation. I see many of my dearest friends in Wheeling, many symphony supporters, and some of you are new faces to me, and that brings us all great joy, because this is the point of the Festival of Ideas, is to bring our constituencies within the community together to discuss topics that are not easy. The last time we were here, we discussed Soviet realities for artists, we discussed anti-Semitism, and we discussed racism. And today we're here to discuss, as Sonia mentioned, the importance of the Violins of Hope project, which is a beautiful testament to the power of art in the darkest of times. And of course, one of the things that was in our intention set for that conversation was to talk about how the past must be remembered so that the errors of the past are not repeated. And one of the things that I regret about being a symphony orchestra conductor in the pathway of my artistic being is that symphony orchestras are not nimble current events. But sometimes art mirrors life. And the last time we did this, and we were talking about Shostakovich, rather, the invasion of Ukraine was something very much present in our minds. And now, sadly, in the past 8 days, another invasion of human rights has happened. And the way that the symphony has programmed a space for conversation all of a sudden feels all the more vital and necessary. So I appreciate you having made time in your day to be here, and I appreciate both of you for being on this panel today. And in times of need in this community, I turn to Rabbi Leaf for his wisdom and his strength and the proactive nature of his thinking. And I would like to do that now.
Well, thank you. I'm a little annoyed that we're not talking about roller derby. I made a joking comment to Maestro Devlin a while back when this was discussed, the upcoming plan. And I said, you made me talk about Wagner last time, and somehow I'm still talking about the Nazis this time. Could there be something positive that we could discuss? And ironically, I think that's really the most important piece. As a Jewish community leader, I am unfortunately often asked to speak about the Holocaust as a tragedy of our modern times. It is not the only tragedy that's befallen the Jewish people over the years. It is simply the most recent, or it was, until the events of this past weekend, which saw the largest number of Jews murdered in a single day since the Holocaust. And so when we think about the events of the current horrible experiences going on in the Holy Land, of remembrance of the Holocaust, I think the story of the Violins of Hope is incredibly important because it reminds us of the indomitable human spirit, those who perish, but also those who survive. And that Judaism, as a religious tradition, certainly focuses on our lives, not on our deaths. Our daughter religions, both Christianity and Islam, talk a lot about this. Judaism, religiously speaking, focuses almost entirely on what happens while we're alive. And so thinking about tragic events of our past, not only in terms of the death, but also in terms of life continuing, is critical. And all the more so this week, as war is happening in the Holy Land currently. This is yet another terrible experience, and we as a Jewish community are certainly struggling in very serious ways at the moment. And I think that's going to worsen in the days ahead as the war becomes even more destructive and more people die, and the images on the news will be horrible to watch. It's important to remember that many tragedies of the past have been transcended and seen less in the eventual aftermath than they were in the moment because they've been overcome. Everything that was ever difficult in your life looks less difficult than whatever you're dealing with at the moment because all those other things you've already accomplished. But in that moment, it is helpful to look back and say, well, all those other things were overcome. I hope and pray that this will too, as speedily as possible and with as few casualties as possible, though we're sure there will be many. I think it's worthwhile, tremendously so, to celebrate the legacy of the Violins of Hope because they remind us that there is a future possible. And that remembering the past should empower and inspire us to make that future all the better. Thank you, Rabbi. And to my right, thank you for traveling all the way from Pittsburgh to be with us here today, is Williams, who is our principal clarinetist. And we will hear from him very shortly about the role he will play in our concertizing this week and in the role of Judaism in his life.
Barb, I'm going to turn to you next and ask similarly for your message for our community right now, and then your connection to life.
Music has a universal language. No matter what language you speak, when you see a musical score, everyone can play it. And when you hear the music, everyone can understand what the music is trying to say. So that is an overriding theme with the Violins of Hope, and the importance of the voice of music and the voice of these violins. Never again is fragile, and we can't be complacent. It is most important, the most important component of the Violins of Hope is the educational component, whether it be in schools, in community events like this, going to the exhibit and seeing the actual violins and reading the stories, going to the concerts and hearing the violins being played. That is the power of this moment, and it also speaks to the individual. Each violin represents an individual person, an individual voice, a voice that was lost in the Holocaust, or a voice that may have survived, but perhaps they have died since, and it is remembering their story and that story. After the Holocaust, where there were 6 million people, Jewish people killed, 1.5 million children killed, which would be, if you think about it, the population of West Virginia, 1.5 million children. The importance of this is to take away thinking of it as this number that we cannot get our heads around, 6 million, but thinking of it as the one person and their story, the one person who is just like you and me, and what happened in their life, and what happened to them during this time. The Weinsteins had a personal connection to the Violins of Hope because they were luthiers. It is a long story to tell, and I will give you the Cliff Note version of it, but this book, The Violins of Hope, will give you so much more information about what this story is about. It was written by James Grimes in 2011. He went to their workshop, Avi and Amnon's workshop in Tel Aviv, Israel, and stayed there with them to understand what this project was. This was the first time that the violins in 2012 coming to the United States. This is an international project that has been around the world and played everywhere from Jerusalem to Auschwitz during the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. These same violins that played at that time there were back playing there again. What a powerful moment. And it speaks to the determination of the human spirit. And to that end, the project of bringing this to Pittsburgh is also timely, because in just a week, it will be 5 years since the terrorist gunman came into the Tree of Life during a Sabbath Shabbat service and killed 11 people that were praying during services. And it just so happens that this coincides with that. The Weinsteins were given the opportunity to put the violins that they have. They have a collection now of 100 of them, and getting more every day, into a museum in Tel Aviv And they said, no, we need to take this to the world. We need to share these stories with students, with adults, with everybody. Everybody needs to hear these stories. And so they chose to make this something that they bring to communities around the world. And in fact, getting on the list to get them to come to your community is about a 5-year waiting list. That is how popular this is. And they don't just go to big cities, they go to smaller places, places where people don't even know about the Holocaust or don't believe in the Holocaust, that it happened, or to places where students aren't learning about the Holocaust. That is key to everything that they do. And you here in Wheeling have an opportunity to come to the whole festival of ideas where we are sharing these kinds of stories, to hear the violins being played, and to Akshi and Amar, hearing the violins allows the voices of those that perished to speak again. It is a beautiful moment. It is a composition of the human spirit. In Pittsburgh, over the 7 weeks that it is going to be there, there are 60-some events, all of which are free, except for a couple of the concerts. And in this booklet, you will find the information about all of them. You can also go online to find out information through Violins of Hope at Pittsburgh.com. There are exhibits, there are cultural events. The exhibit is at Carnegie Mellon University. There are 25 violins on exhibit there. They are the ones that are no longer being played. Some of them have come to the Weinsteins in pieces, and they decided to keep that particular violin just like that because it showed how lives were shattered and what the Holocaust did to the Jewish people. There are many violins there, each with their own story. You can go there and read about it, or you could take a tour with a docent like myself to hear those stories. It is very powerful, and it is well worth taking the time to go to see that, to hear the violins being played, and to remember those voices that have been silenced.
Thank you so much for your words, for your collaboration with the WSO and with Violins. One thing that struck me, we hear this a lot, right? Music is a universal language. And I'm glad you brought that up because there aren't very many universal languages. I see mathematics as one of those. I see athletics as one of those, and music. These are things that people from around the world can come together who do not speak the same verbal or written language, and they can participate together. And one of the things that I relish about the symphony is that we are a perfect version, in my mind, of a community on stage. When we get together to perform as the Wheeling Symphony, 60, 70, 80 people come together who are different ages, ethnicities, genders, sexual orientations, religions, and we put all of those differences aside to create beauty for our community together. And that is what I hope that you see, not just this week, but every week when you come to see the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra. And one of the leaders of that community is sitting beside me here, Rowie. And a principle we hold dear at the Wheeling Symphony is to promote the musicianship and stories of the members of our orchestra. And Rowie, when I called you last year to tell you about this concert, we had some very meaningful discussions. We decided on the pieces to play together and the types of programming that we thought would be most impactful to tell your story. Would you be so kind as to introduce yourself to our audience and to talk a little bit about that process?
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. My name is Rowie Manzurin. I've been here since, in the United States since 2000. I'm an American citizen too. I was born and raised in Israel, and I'm also the Jewish faith as well. And when Master Dublin spoke with me about how could we impact the community of Wheeling, the thing that came to my mind was the story of my grandmother. My grandmother, who passed away, was the sole survivor of her family when she was 10 years old in Ukraine. Nazis came in, and I'm not going to go into too many details, but I would say that they just shot her entire family. She saw it through the closet, and then walked over the bodies and hid in the forests around that area for about 5 years with different partisans. Met my grandfather and moved in the early, I would say mid-40s to Palestine, and then when it became Israel, she was one of the pioneers of building the country. The reason I chose her, because I had other family members also that were affected by the Holocaust. When I always try to get information about her experience, she always pushed back and did not want to share. So most of the information I know of what happened during that time is from my mother, from my aunt, from different relatives. But she actually one day turned to me and said, you know, Rohit, I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. It really hit me, and as I grew older, I started to understand her approach better. She never complained, just worked hard. And turned the entire experience of going from those atrocities into building a completely brand new life and a family in Israel. Actually, the way I look at it is, if she wouldn't have made it, I wouldn't be sitting here telling you this story. So, when Mr. Devlin and I spoke about the violins of hope, and I'm stressing the word hope, this is the chance for us to pass the hope. So, in terms of the piece, we chose a piece by Paul Ben-Hani. His real name was, or it is his real name, but when he was growing up in Germany, his name was Paul Frankenberg. But he left Germany in 1933. He was a quite prominent musician in Germany. He studied, I think, with student Bruckner, and he was composition. He studied with them, and he was also he was an assistant conductor to Furtwängler, who was a very prominent conductor at the time. So he moved to Israel at that time and decided to create a new language of music, a new national school of music, an Israeli one. And he combined his knowledge from Germany with Jewish melodies and I would say also Middle Eastern modalities. So that's the type of harmony. It's very lush, it's very romantic. But when you listen to the music, there's nothing really sad about it. It's very hopeful. And when I was, I guess about 15 or 16, I used to listen to it a lot. This is also my first time playing it. So it's going to be a premiere for myself. But the music itself, I always remember listening to it and thinking, what is it trying to project? And in many ways, it reminded me of what Poland tried to do in this country, taking, the famous Appalachian Spring and showing the Appalachian Trail. You hear the trains going by. So when you listen to this music, you actually can hear the pioneers building the country. You hear them dancing in a kibbutz, which is a small community in Israel, and you you can also see the terrain. That's what I could hear sunrise. I could see things happening when I was listening to the music. It's like a musical panorama of Israel. So that reminded me of my grandmother. Not complaining, just building a brand new life and being happy that she got the chance to do so. In the music, there are moments though you feel a moment of nostalgia, as if thinking of the old world and the old life. But it always comes back to reality, and it starts very softly and it ends very softly too. So that's my narrative of the piece. I never met Paul Ben-Chaim. And by the way, just one last thing. He changed his name from Paul Frankenberger to Paul Ben-Chaim. Ben-Chaim in Hebrew means son of life. So the music means a lot to me personally and to Master Dublin as well. And we're hoping you will be there and join the experience.
Thank you, Rui. You mentioned one of the pieces on the program, and the story about the composer resonates with me with the other two pieces on the program, which I'll just briefly outline for you before we turn to our panelists once again. The second piece on the program, after we hear Rui's tribute to open the concert, will be by a composer named Walter Bricht. How many of you, before we programmed this piece, had heard of Walter Bricht? Two. I have. What we try to do at the Symphony is to tie huge questions, worldwide and national issues, to our home. And when we knew Violins was coming here, we said, how can we connect this to West Virginia? And during the pandemic, my best friend and a dear musical colleague named Michael Ellis Ingram, who's about to be in Wheeling starting tomorrow, and I started conversing about how could we draw that connection. We discovered together an archive in Vienna that houses treasures recovered from the Holocaust. And Michael went to that archive, worked with the archivists, and found a work by a man named Walter Bricht, who was so popular in the 20s and 30s in Germany as a composer, despite being a Jew, that Hitler offered him honorary Aryan status. And you can imagine that if he accepted this offer, it would mean safety for him and his family, a platform for his art, security for his colleagues. But he declined, and speaking no words of English, moved to Charleston, West Virginia. He found a safe haven here. There used to be a conservatory of music where talented undergraduate and graduate students could study. And he became the head of faculty there, and then eventually moved to Bloomington, Indiana, where he became the head of faculty at the Indiana University School of Music, called the Jacobs School of Music now, which is one of the foremost in the country. In that archive, we discovered a piece that has never been performed before, the piano concerto in the key of A minor. We found Bricht's surviving relatives and gave them permission to notate this piece in modern notation. We worked with the publisher of Bricht's music in England to grant the permission for our project. And so I'm pleased to say that Thursday night in the Capitol, we will give the world premiere of this piece of music. Bricht's surviving relatives, including his daughter, will be at the Capitol. And Michael Ingram is coming from Germany to conduct the work, which I felt was the most appropriate thing given his deep research and study and the notation that he did. He's touched every single foot of the piece. And so this is the first time in my tenure here, besides our assistant conductors who are staff members, that I've invited a guest to share the podium at the Violins Symphony, and it's felt incredible. So that is the second piece. And then the third piece, much cleaner in terms of the description. Felix Mendelssohn, 100 years before the Holocaust, he died in 1847, but he had to change his name the other way. He was birthed Felix Bartholdy Mendelssohn, and and then added the surname Bartholdi to disguise his Jewish heritage. He was born of Jewish heritage and at the age of 7 was baptized as a Protestant in order to better be accepted by the society in which he lived. So Semitism was not a new construction by Hitler and his colleagues. It is the culminating point up until that time of something deep-seated in German culture, but something beautiful. We talk about hope. Michael is a black man, and he left the United States because of the racism he felt he was facing within the classical music industry. And he moved to the place in the world that he felt the most accepted, Germany. So 75 years later, Germany has done the introspective work to become a place that Michael Ingram feels is the safest place for a black man to move to in the classical music world. And I think there's a beautiful message. So now, please let me turn again to you, Rabbi. What is the way that our audience may be able to position themselves to best be in the concert hall this Thursday? What is a way to prepare our souls for what we're about to experience through the art?
You mean other than buying a ticket?
Violins.com.
I think that when we talk about the experience of those who have had to hide who they are to be accepted, as Mendelssohn did, those who had to leave for their very own safety, as Richard did, I think that the sense of insecurity and unsettledness is something that we don't really connect with in our world today. Most of us are pretty comfortable. Most of us have a nice life and a nice home and friends and feel rooted in society. Even if we didn't, if we moved from Wheeling to somewhere else, we'd be fine. And if we moved from somewhere else to Wheeling, we'd be fine. We'd find a way to fit in. And for the Jewish community, there have been times historically when they were well accepted by their neighbors, and there have been times historically when Jews were not well accepted by their neighbors. But in the 4,000 years that there have been Jews in the world, so almost 4,000 years since the time of Abraham, for fewer than 400 of those 4,000 years, there have been spotty moments when Jews had a place of their own. There were a couple hundred years in the time of the judges and the kings that you read about in the Bible. There was less than 100 years after the time of the Maccabees, the Hanukkah story. And there's less than 100 years since the founding of the State of Israel in 1948, when Jews have been in a land of their own in the Holy Land. And in all other places, they were guests, sometimes tolerated, sometimes not. And even in the Holy Land, not always safe and at ease. If we look at those stories from the Bible, the judges and the kings, they're constantly under attack. If we look at the time of the Maccabees, they are constantly under attack. And if we look at the modern state of Israel, they've been quite frequently constantly under attack, including this past week. And so that unsettledness, that outsiderness, that hoping to find a place to fit in, that unease, is definitely something that's unfamiliar for most of us. But if you wanted to reflect on something that would perhaps change your perspective, I would argue that's really the top of the list. That in Christian Europe, Jews were not one of us. In the Muslim East, from the 600s to the present, Jews were not one of us. In the Greco-Roman world, Jews were not one of us. We've always been the tiny minority, sometimes welcomed, sometimes included, sometimes actively persecuted. But I think there hasn't been, until the United States, and even here, there have been worse and less worse moments of anti-Semitic thought and feeling and sentiment and act. But to be a Jew is often to be the other, the outsider, and not always to have that sense of calm and ease. We're very, our Jewish community here in Wheeling has been around since the 1840s. We're very much a part of this community. If you go upstairs to look at the history exhibit in the lobby, a significant portion of it revolves around the impact that Jewish families have made on this community. It's really amazing. We've been made to feel welcome, which is wonderful. And yet, we're still a tiny, tiny minority of the population. So I would argue that would be, I think, the one piece to perhaps reflect on the experience of Mendelssohn's family having to choose to give up Judaism and become Christians, and refusing to deny his Judaism and leaving Germany without his popularity. I think those are related, connected themes, and still a tension in the lives of Jews to the present day, including our fellow Jews in Israel who are being attacked for their Jewishness still.
Thank you, Rabbi. To discuss a little bit more about specifically the Violins book part, you mentioned in the book that there are so many stories that should be read. We encourage everyone to find the book. But we do have one special violin here in Wheeling with us this week because Sonia, our amazing new executive director, worked on this project when it was in Nashville several years ago. I was actually there when they did this project. And the National Symphony was gifted one of the violins, so Sonia was thoughtful enough to obtain it on a loan for us for about a month. Would you be so kind as to share this violin, which will be played by Rachel Stegeman, our concertmaster throughout this week?
So, as Maestro Devlin was saying, to prepare you for the impact of this concert, one of the things is seeing the violins, the power of seeing a violin. So this particular violin is violin number 17 in the collection of the Weinsteins, of the 100 violins that they have at this point. This one is one of the ones that is very special to Ashi and his father, Amman, because it doesn't have a particular personal story. This is dedicated to the klezmer musicians, and that was the vast majority of the musicians' violins that they have in their collection. They were noted to be the klezmer violins and played by Jewish players because of the Stars of David that were on them. This was done on purpose because it allowed the players to get more jobs if they were known to be Jewish klezmer violinists in Germany and in Europe. And so that was the idea behind it. But the reason that this is so important to the Weinsteins, and particularly to Amnon, is because he lost 400 members of his family in the Holocaust. They were murdered and buried in mass graves. His mother's family was also decimated in the forest. They were taken out and just shot in the forest. They have no tombstones. They have no way, no place to remember them or recognize them. And so to the Weinsteins, this is in memory of all of those who no longer have a way, particular personal story to remember them, but instead it remembers all of the klezmer musicians who were lost. The other thing to let you know about the word klezmer is it's actually a Yiddish word. It is a contraction of two Hebrew words. The first part, klei, meaning instrument, and zamir, meaning music or song. And so this music that was played has been played for hundreds of years by Jewish musicians. It is a very upbeat, joyful sounding piece. It has jazz intonations in it and improvisation as part of it. And it was played during happy events, weddings, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, any happy occasion. And so this was the music that was played. This was played in the ghettos. It was played by the partisans in the forest. It was played quietly in the camps because the klezmer music was not allowed in the extermination and death camps, the concentration camps. There, the music was strictly music that was composed by German composers and nothing else, and mainly marches that were played. And they were not only, it's interesting to think about this, that during the selection process, once they determined if you were going to the right or to the left, and you were going to live, they asked you what you did. And if you said you were a physician, an engineer, anything that you would think that would have merit, didn't matter. If you said that you were a musician, you were sent to a special barracks where you then had to audition and prove your worth as a musician. And if you proved worthy, you stayed in the musician's barracks. And in Auschwitz alone, Auschwitz-Birkenau, two different camps. Birkenau is a sub-camp of Auschwitz. There were many orchestras, both in the men's and women's camps, as well as smaller groupings of musicians that played not only as the people stood during roll call, as they marched out of the gates to work, as they came back into work, they played in the rain, in the cold, in the snow. It didn't matter. They had to keep playing. They even played as people got off the trains and went through the selection. And this was all part of the Nazi regime's propaganda campaign. It was all part of the plan to make it seem like we are a cultured people, that when the people arrived off the trains and they heard the music, they thought for a brief moment, maybe, this isn't so bad. That was actually something that was said because they heard the music and they thought, wow, there is music here. So it was all part of the ruse, but there were players that could not bear to sit there and play as their loved ones were being marched off to the gas chambers. One of the things that stirred Amnon to start to do this project was a violin was brought to him that had been played in Auschwitz. And this violin had survived, was in terrible condition, but this person was bringing it so that his grandson might learn to play the violin and follow in that Jewish tradition. When Amnon opened the violin, inside it was filled with black dust. This was from the crematoriums. This always was falling there. And it was at that point that Amnon knew that he couldn't remain silent anymore and that he needed to give these violins and these people their voices once again. So it is so important, the power of where these violins have been, the stories that they told, that they tell, and remembering the individual, not the mass numbers, but the person. That's the power of this.
I'm going to turn for one more prepared remark from our panel to Rowie, but please know that after I do that, I'm going to turn to you all for questions. We'll have about 15 minutes for questions, so please be thinking about what you would like to ask our panelists as we move towards that segment of our panel. So, Rowie, you've been in the Wheeling Symphony, is it 2 decades? 26, I'm so sorry. Forgive me. But you've been playing in orchestras for many decades. The power of music sometimes resides in its beauty. Sometimes it relies on its entertaining, Sutton Foster. And other times it feels like art and life align closely in moments like that. What are the types of feelings that you as a person predict experiencing on the stage? And what do you hope that the performance can mean to those who are lucky enough to be in the hall with us?
That's a good question.
You're welcome.
I'm hoping I'm not going to be totally overwhelmed on Thursday. We should start with that. That's what I'm most prepared for. But I'm looking for it to be an opportunity to inspire the community. Education is what moves us forward. Ignorance is what moves us backwards. I think Einstein once said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So, if we don't learn from the past, we're doomed to do it again. So I think it's important to be there. By being there, you'll show your support, you'll show your understanding, and most importantly, I'm hoping you'll be able to pass it to the next generation. Because there are a lot of people that just don't understand or don't believe that it happened, will happen, could happen. I know that this happened a long time ago. It happened over 80 years ago. But it could easily happen again. And hate is what we're trying to fight. Hate is nothing that you spoke about international language. I think hate and love is also international language. But we have the choice to choose which one we want to use. Hate is only going to lead to more hate. Love is going to lead to more love. And that's, I think, what we need to teach our children, teach our colleagues, teach our friends, our families, and then we can all live in harmony, have a better place. It's nothing political or anything like that. It's just us humans, all under the same umbrella. Music is an incredible vehicle to pass this. During World War II, the great conductor, Toscanini, he was one of the founders, together with Albert Einstein, of the Israel Philharmonic. During the Holocaust, he refused to play and conduct in Nazi Germany. And then more musicians followed after him. We're using music to do the same. The Violins Symphony is a beacon of cultural purity in our community. And I'm hoping more and more people will come and unite there and understand we have a lot to share together. There's more to us as the people. We have more in common than we have differences. We just have to give it a chance. I'm sorry, during also this situation that's happening right now in Israel, it's hard for me because my family is there. So I'm trying to choose my words quite carefully and to inspire you to really use a lot of love and healing and and don't be silent. Be supportive of each other, accept the other. And I truly hope that not only you will be there, you will bring a lot of people with you.
Thank you. I turn to you all for questions. It's hard to be the first one.
John,
wondering if it's possible to invite people to the concert or reprogram some of these pieces of music later, venues to spread the message more. I don't know if the group of something, but people like that can benefit from hearing the music.
Mhm. It's difficult because people must opt into the experiences with the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra. And because of that, and because we are a community asset, we try very hard to remain apolitical. We are for everyone. But every once in a while, there's a moment that comes along where there's a question of right and wrong that is intermixed with political questions. And personally, I feel like this is one of those times. And so we are going to stand in unity with our Jewish brothers and sisters. I am a Catholic person. And say what is happening is wrong and it is evil, and we condemn it. But we also understand that not everyone in this world may agree through either ignorance or difference of opinion or both. And that's something that we acknowledge, but in this case, I do not feel like there are two equal sides. And so in this community, we are going to spread messages of love, acceptance, and joy, and never bigotry or hatred. Thank you for your question. Yes.
I have one question, since you have mentioned certainly trying very hard in this way to bring this to other people, other places. And I believe it was mentioned that the violin will be here for a month. Okay. Do you have any plans, or has anyone considered anything to do with any of the schools in the area?
Yes, absolutely. This is a core key component of this. Here in Wheeling as well as in Pittsburgh. There are 60-some schools coming in Pittsburgh to the exhibit, as well as violins going to the schools. Here in this area, we have a program planned at John Marshall High School. We have invited all of the schools to come that can. We are also planning on taking the violin to some of the schools that are going to be able to participate, to tell the story, to share the information. And it has been my experience with teaching students about the Holocaust and about the messages of the Holocaust, that they take it home and share it with their parents, and they also share it with their peers. So it goes in all directions. So absolutely. As well as a program that we're doing at Temple Shalom that is open to the community.
This is the first of 5 events that the Wheeling Symphony is overseeing. The ones at the schools are not published for everybody because they're going to go to the students.
But the one in Temple Shalom is this Sunday at 2 p.m. And it's free.
And they usually have
Definitely will be food.
comment, and then weird curiosity question. First of all, I love the stories behind the pieces that are going to be played. I hope, and you usually do this, but I hope you will relate those stories tonight.
It's hard to get me to not speak.
Yeah. And here's my curiosity. I know that people, for instance, is read from right to left. When you talk about the universality of music, are musical notes in Israel, are they read left to right or right to left? Right.
They're read exactly the same. They're written here. Same way, yes. All around the world, it's the same.
So it must be difficult if there are lyrics to go with the music, because you'd be used to reading the lyrics right to left. Left to right.
You're absolutely right. It's written in pieces of the words, of course, right? So it's broken words. So above the notes, you have broken He said the word aiming that way. This way, but to get used to it. I will share a funny anecdote that when I started studying music as a child, before I even played the clarinet, I played the recorder and I read the music backwards. This is freaking bad.
I think there's a basic for pianos, funny sort of where the turns it upside down. Yeah. YouTube, watch the YouTube. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We have time for one or two. Yes.
I know that there's a concert talk before the symphony. Will there be anything afterwards?
That's correct. At 6 p.m. in the upstairs ballroom at the Capitol Theater, there will be an hour-long presentation with the people you see here, as well as additional members of the team from Violins of Hope and Michael Ellis Ingram. There is nothing planned for after the concert, but this is the first of 4 preliminary events as part of the festival ideas that are open to the public. And Sonia Thomes at the end of our discussion today is going to come up and let everybody know about all of those details as well as some additional information. But the concert itself will serve as the end point of this project. Thank you for asking. How about one more, and then we'll turn to Sonia for our closing.
I would just like to ask Rabbi Lee to share briefly, for anyone who missed it Tuesday evening, how to view the talk that he gave at Temple Shalom about the current situation.
Well, thank you. We had an interfaith service in support of Israel on Tuesday evening, and you can find the entire service with faith leaders from across the spectrum of faith in our community. It was a wonderful service for those who were with us. It was actually quite a nice crowd. Maestro Devin also was there. It was wonderful to see you there. Thank you so much for your support. You can see that on the Temple Shalom Facebook page, which is, if you go to Facebook, in fact, is Temple Shalom WVLIVE. So Temple Shalom West Virginia Live, all spelled. So you're more than welcome to go and see our Facebook page. It's all public, so you can certainly watch and hear not just my remarks, but Bishop Brennan, Bishop of the Diocese of Wheeling Charleston, Ken Hardway from First Christian Church was there, Eric Harvey from Advanced Memorial Presbyterian Church was there. We had a wonderful day full of faith leaders from across the community. It was really an honor to get to be with several friends and colleagues standing with us. Chris Figueretti from the Vineyard spoke beautifully. It was really lovely evening, and you can watch the whole service. It's still on our Facebook page. And there were cookies. There's usually cookies in them.
So can I say thank you, Rabbi, Barb, Roe, can we please acknowledge their presence there with us?
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider coming to the rest of our events. The next one is Sunday at 2 p.m. at Temple Shalom, and there will be a recital and meaningful conversation. You'll get to hear Robbie play some excerpts from the work that he will be playing on the full concert. Dr. Linda Cohen and Amy Sledge will be performing together, and Michael Ellis Ingram will be there to talk more about the multi-reach piano concerto. So please join us there on Sunday at 2 p.m. at the Temple. And then Tuesday evening, we'll be at the Several Fine Arts Center with Dominic Cayley, who is our piano soloist on the multi-reach piano concerto. He'll be doing an evening recital. And if you would just come and enjoy, he will be talking and playing. It will be really a very special evening. So please add all these to your calendar, and of course, join us at the Capitol on Thursday, October 19th. 6 p.m. is a pre-concert lecture for all ticket holders up in the ballroom. And then 7:30, the full program with the orchestra. If you have any questions, back on our table over there, we've got a full listing of all the concerts that we have this season. We'd love to see what as many as possible. We also have information about the Violins of Hope, those booklets that you see on the table. And some of you, hopefully all of you, registered to win, we'll do a little drawing, a copy of Violins of Hope. So John, someone would do the honors of pulling out a name. Let's see who our winner is. Okay, Karen McClelland. Hi, thank you. Thank you again. We could not offer all of these very special events for free for the community without the generous support of John and Woody. Thank you to the WSO staff. It's taken many conversations and many months of planning to bring all this together. So please join us. And if you would like to buy tickets for Thursday night, please go see Sadie right over there. She's going to help you out with all set for today. Thank you.